Hey, what's up guys? How's it going? This is Furgie here, back from A Squad Gaming, and today we are back once again on Forza Motorsport 6. You may see the car in front of me here is a little bit flashier than some of the others we've been driving in previously, and that's because we are finally out of the Super Street volume and instead are jumping right into the Sport Icons volume. Today we're going to be using a little bit more powerful of a car, actually a lot more powerful of a car compared to what we've seen in the past, and we're going to be racing a lot more powerful cars as well. We are jumping right into the Sport Icon volume, as I said, under the Nightfall Series. This is the first series, and all 4 races, as the name says, are in the dark. So that makes things a little bit more difficult, but it's also a lot more interesting. As you can see here, we are running in the 2015 Challenger SRT Hellcat, and this is an absolute animal of a car. It has about 707 horsepower, runs on a 6.2 liter V8 engine, and costs about $59,000, so it is a giant upgrade from the base Challenger, and it's well worth it. The only issue about this car is it is a gigantic muscle car and it weighs a lot compared to some of the others we'll be racing in. So although the speed and acceleration is very quick compared to some of the others, the handling and braking is a little bit on the downside, and since the car is so heavy, it's going to take a long time to brake from those high speeds with that high acceleration. That's really the worst thing about this car. On top of everything else, it does perform very well. I had a little bit of trouble in this series actually getting through some of these races. Usually I can kind of get through them on the first or second try, but a few of these, it took me a little bit more work to get through. I don't know if that was part of the rain or part of the darkness or just maybe the car I chose. I actually did consider switching off the Hellcat for a while, but I managed to get in the hang of it, and I did actually like it quite a bit once we finished the series. So I can give it a positive review even though it weighs so much. As you can see here, the 0 to 60, 0 to 100, and the top speed are all crazy. 3.260, 6.500, and a 217 top speed is insane, especially with this heavy of a car. So that's really the only bad thing about it, but other than that, I love it, and it's a lot of fun. So let's jump right into our first race here on the Nightfall Series. Alright, so our first race out of 4 is the Le Mans Circuit de la Sarthe. I don't know what that actually means in English, but all of the races in this series kind of operate the same way. We don't have very many laps. It's either going to be 2 or 3 laps all the way around. There's a lot of sharp corners. There are also a lot of straights, but just a lot of turns, a lot of corners, a lot of places that are really going to test the ability of the vehicle you're driving in. Compared to some of the other cars we're racing, they are so much lighter than this Hellcat that's really our biggest disadvantage, is the fact that we are so heavy. We are, however, much faster than them, and you're going to be able to pass very well on the straights. The corners are just really where you're going to have to pay attention, and that's one of the reasons why some of these races are a little bit more difficult. Now, compared to some of the other races we've done previously in the dark, this one is none of these actually are very light at all. There are actually instances where the only light you have is going to be coming out of your headlights, and that's another very difficult thing about it, is you have to pretty much know the track like the back of your hand, because you're not going to be able to see too much far ahead of you, so you're going to want to get a few runs on this lap, which is maybe another reason why you probably won't be able to get on the first try, but you never know. Some people may be very good drivers and you may pick a very nice car to drive in. Honestly, I would suggest the Hellcat. There are a few others I would suggest as well, some of the lighter vehicles, but this is a great choice because of how fast it is. So this track is like many of the others that we're going to be seeing. There's a lot of big, like really sharp U-turns, really sharp 90-degree block turns, and a lot of straights. So really it kind of equals out. If you pick a slower car, you might be at a deficit on the straights but have more of an advantage on the curves. And if you pick a faster car with more weight, maybe worse handling, you're going to take advantage on the straights and have a little bit more trouble with the corners. Either way, things should be pretty easy for you. This is one of the easier laps that we have to deal with at first. It's a good warm-up. I would be able to set anywhere from expert to pro difficulty, even down to highly skilled if you're having a little bit of trouble. But other than that, really this first track isn't going to give you too much trouble, and I wish you guys best of luck because it's a good warm-up compared to what we're going to be seeing next. Alright, next up we only have 2 laps around the Circuit de Spa-Francorchamps, which is less than the last 3, obviously. I think this is actually I think it is the longest track in the series, so again, it kind of operates like the last. There's going to be a lot of straights, even more than the last race, honestly, and there's also going to be a lot of really sharp little corners and turns and things like that. Like I said, they're all going to operate and in pretty similar fashion. There's just a few things about certain laps that are going to make them a little bit more difficult, this one being a little bit harder than the last. As I've said in some of my previous videos, if the videos come out to be a little bit too long, as this one barely was, I am going to have to cut out some laps. Fortunately, we only have 6 races in this series, or 4 races, which is going to make things a lot easier on us. We can put more of the footage in and things like that. So I don't have to cut out as much, but I do have to take out a little bit because some of these laps are very, very long. So despite the fact that we only have 4 races, some of these races do take quite a while. So that's my reasoning for that. I think I have to cut out a lap out of the last 2 races, but these first 2, you'll be able to see the full footage of them. Now, this is one of my favorites that we actually run in the series. There are a lot of cool bends, a lot of places to go very quick, and a lot of places where you can take advantage of the drive tires, like this example right here. Now, keep in mind, you are in a very heavy car, so if you're being told to brake, I would advise it. Now, in some of the situations, you might not need to if you're in a lighter car or it's less of a bend, but that turn right there, and maybe even this one, is just an example of how if you're not braking and you're still accelerating through them, you might be going off the track. Because this car is a little bit harder to handle than some others. And of course you can take advantage of the drive tires on those big straights where they might brake and you might not have to, but I would advise at least braking a little bit because you want to always be in control of what you're doing. There are also a lot of nice little S-turns to pass in here, cut across the corners, as you see me do fairly often in these races and these vehicles and things like that. So those are the 2 things I would really expect to pay attention to on this race, are the straights where you might not have to brake as much as the drive tires do, and the S-turns where you can cut straight through them. I'm going to get a couple passes in as well, maybe even run into the guy that's ahead of you and get ahead of him and do things like that. Remember, you can always play dirty because the drive tires are really not going to hold a grudge. Obviously, it's going to make your drive tar more aggressive in other people's races, but that's their problem, isn't it? So, other than that, I think that's just about it for this race. Again, the beginning of the lap is a little bit more important than the end of the lap. Near the end of the lap, there are a lot more really longer bends, really long straightaways, and things should be a little bit easier for you. Really, this is a pretty easy track, even compared to the last one as well. But like I said, the 2 places you want to pay attention to the most are at the beginning of the lap and through the rest of the lap. Just drive as well as you can. Don't go too crazy. I know you're in a fast car, but you want to pay attention to what you're doing still. You want to pay attention to your braking and things like that, because just like in any vehicle, you can always screw up and go into the sand or the grass. So pay attention. Other than that, pay attention to the beginning of the lap, and the rest of the lap is pretty much a breeze. You should be able to get even more passes in, especially if you're in a quick car like this Hellcat. So that's just about it for this race, and I will see you guys in the next one. Alright, for our third race we are racing at the notorious Nurburgring, and this out of the four is probably the most difficult in my opinion, maybe the last race. Just for a couple reasons. This lap is probably the bendiest out of all of them. There are a lot of turns. There are still quite a few straights and more places to take advantage of the speed of your vehicle, a more disadvantage if you're in a slow car. But there are even more turns. They're a lot sharper. They're a lot more difficult. Some of them are elevated and things like that. If you've raced on Nürburgring before, you know how a few of the first turns operate. They kind of dip in, like kind of in Indy 500 lap or something like that, and that's what makes them slightly more difficult in some situations. But other than that, the lap really isn't too more difficult than any of the other two we've raced on. If you're comfortable with your car at this point, it is kind of an awkward jump from all of these slower cars that we used in the previous volume into this one, because all of these cars are much more powerful, much faster, and a lot more fun to drive. It's just harder to get used to driving that quickly, and the brake speeds and the weights of the car and things like that. So this is basically how the beginning of Nürburgring operates. It's just their full circuit lap. We have to go around 3 times, and the turns are very sharp, very difficult, and I would say the primary thing, even though you have an advantage in this Hellcat, is to pay attention to your braking and your turning. Primarily in the beginning of the lap, near the end of the lap, as you can see, if you can see there on the mini-map, we have 2 gigantic straightaways, along with a bend that you really don't have to brake too much on, that you can get a lot of really nice passes in. So be patient in the beginning of the lap. This kind of operates like Nürburgring. And then at the end of the lap, you can take advantage and get some good passes and take advantage of the drive guitars, and really that's where you're going to gain your spots. That's where you're going to get in the top 3 in order to get to the next race. The beginning of the lap, as I said, is a lot more difficult. We're nearing these 2 curves that are a little bit more elevated. They're especially bad in the rain, so thankfully we're not in the rain, but they are a little bit more difficult than some of the others you'll race on, especially this next one, this really, really short loop. The only other thing about this track is it's probably the darkest one. There are a few places near the end of the lap where really your headlights are the only light you have at all, and that can make things a little bit more difficult as well, especially if you're not a little bitch like me and using the brake assist line. Then you really can't see anything, and that must be very difficult. I actually have tried it, and it is a hard time. I like seeing kind of, even if I know I'm supposed to brake, I like seeing it as visual, just for a little bit of help. Maybe I'll start turning it off, who knows. But like I said, it is very dark. Your taillights might help a little bit, but your headlights are pretty much your primary source of light on certain parts of this lap. So take advantage of the cars ahead of you if they're brightly colored or something, or even your own car. And other than that, you should be pretty much fine around Nürburgring. It's really the last track where things get a little bit more difficult. So I'll stop talking. That's just about it for this track, and good luck. Alright, our final race, as I kind of hinted to in a previous race a couple minutes ago, is at Nurburgring International Raceway. And this track is really a lot of fun. I know we've really only driven on it in the rain before, but now that we get to the dry version, even though we're in the dark, it is a lot easier to handle, but you do have to go around quite a bit faster. So this lap pretty much operates the same way no matter what kind of weather conditions you're in. It is good to drive well, not necessarily try to get too many passes in at the beginning of the lap, just make sure you're turning well and things like that. But once you're near the end of the lap with that gigantic C turn, and those two turns I talked about in a previous video that you can completely cut short, you don't even have to brake at all, that's really where you're going to get your pass in. That's where if you're in 5th place you can get up to 1st. It's really amazing how much you can take advantage at the end of this lap compared to the first half or so. And that's really, like I said, where you want to pay attention to what you're doing, because you are moving a lot faster than we were back in those hot hatches or that Subaru STI. We're going, you know, upwards of 100 miles an hour now. So pay attention to your braking, use the other cars to your advantage, don't let them throw you off. And really try to stay on the track, because there are a lot of places on this track where you can lose control and you're pretty much donezo. There are a lot of barrels to hit, there's a lot of grass to drive into and things like that. So keep in control of your vehicle, even if you're in the heavy Hellcat like this. Try not to oversteer or anything, and you should really be just fine. This, I would say, this and Nurburgring are the two most difficult in the series. Really none of them are too bad once you adjust to the vehicle you're driving in. This one is just a little bit more difficult to get used to, especially if you've only driven in the rain previously. That's really the biggest thing about it. It operates it's exactly the same as we've driven in previously, so we only have to go around 3 times. It's a bit shorter compared to some of the others. And you should know what you're doing, because we're familiar with this track, especially if you've been racing in online or multiplayer and test drives, tuning your car and things like that. You should be very accustomed to how this track operates. I just want to keep talking for a second because we're nearing the end of the lap, and that's where you can take advantage of things, as I said previously. After this turn right here, you do not have to brake too much at all, actually, until the very end of the lap when you go into the first turn after you cross the finish line. So we're going to gas it here, and then completely cut this first corner if you can. This one's a little bit tougher to hit, and then the second one as well. You can go right across instead of hitting this loop. You can take it wide once you get pavement, followed by this turn, and then one more afterwards, which is really the best place to pass. This one right here is the most notorious and the best one of them all. Also, if you can handle the last turn correctly, not even cheating at all, it's going to make things a lot easier for you. The lap is very dark right here, but you have very bright headlights, and if anyone's ahead of you, you'll be able to see them as well thanks to their headlights. So really, the end of this lap is the most important place to pass. That's just about all I have to say about this. After you clear this lap and this track, you will be done with the first series out of the Sports Icons volume, and you should feel pretty good about yourself, because this is a bit of a tough one compared to the other two we'll be racing in. Those two actually a little bit more fun and a little bit easier. Alright guys, so as we near the end of the lap in the lead here, you've officially finished the first series out of the next volume that we're racing in. You only have a lot more to go, actually, but things do get more fun as you go on. The cars get cooler, the races get faster, they get a little bit more interesting, and things get a little more aggressive and a little bit harder as well, but eventually you should be able to work your way up to unbeatable difficulty. I'm actually at the point now where things get a little bit easier to where maybe you just feel better as a driver. You're more confident on the tracks. You know them a little bit more. You're a little more familiar with them, and things get easier overall. But other than that, I want to thank you all for watching. Like I said, these are still a lot of fun for me to make. I'm still working on all of the showcase videos along with many of the other series that you all be seeing very near here in the future. We do have a few other games in the works that are going to be launching very soon. I won't spoil anything, but do keep your eyes open for those. Other than that, that's just about it for this video. I hope you all enjoyed. I hope you have a lot of fun in these faster, newer cars that you'll be racing in, and I will see you all next time back on A Squad Gaming.